Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we're back. Where are we back, Colin?
We're back on the NonProfit Renaissance, where we help leaders go further and
grow faster.
Yeah.
How's it going? Have you been growing further, or have you been growing faster?
I've been growing. We always get this mixed up. I've been doing it all. I'm going further and growing further.
That's it.
And going and growing. Yeah.
And that's what matters. And that's what we're going to do today, right here. We're going to get right to it. Someone I've known for a long time. A special guest. And it's going to be hard to make fun of his name today because it's kind of straightforward, but we'll still try to butcher it.
Well, we have us. We always have us.
Yeah. He's known as the Gig CX guy. And man, what a LinkedIn freaking mastermind, number one. But Executive Vice President at Arise Virtual Solutions, Chief Growth Officer, Customer Officer. There's so much. He's an artist. He's a leader of leaders, and I've seen him in his element for many years now. We're going to talk about it. But ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, your virtual hands together, unless you're driving, to the one and only Robert Padron. Robert, how are you doing, Robert?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing great.
All is well. Now, I want to see Colin. Colin is from where Colin is. Pronounce his name. It's a Spanish style name.
Yeah.
How would you say it?
This one's so much easier than
like
our
his
last
mom
one.
intended it to be.
Oh, like his Robert Padron.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the exact reaction I'm going for.
Is there a boo effect?
Yeah,
Boo.
There probably is.
My mom is directly from America, so she has never pronounced my name with a Spanish accent. So
okay, good. See, I feel set up here. I feel set up.
Just a little.
No, so it's not Roberto.
Robert. There are a few people that call me Rob. Very few people, and I prefer Robert. But thanks for asking. So it's time to go further and faster, right?
Let's go. But Robert, tell us. I've known you for a while, but our listeners who don't, tell us. Give us a little glimpse of who is Robert and what is Arise. What do you do, and what's happening there?
Yeah, who is Robert? Luckily, I know the answer to that nowadays. I'm a servant leader. People ask me what I do for a living. I have the opportunity to lead people. I just happen to do it at a firm called Arise Virtual Solutions, which is the preeminent provider of Gig CX customer service to major enterprise clients across the world. We've got over 70,000 agents on our platform today, and what I love about the firm that I work with today and what I evangelize is the fact that these are people who are choosing to have life revolve around work versus the other way around. So we're really changing the way the world works, creating opportunities for folks to pick their own schedules every single week so they can be a present parent in their child's lives, or because they have some form of disability that requires them to work from home and they need to have a schedule that works around their doctor appointments, or it's a military spouse that needs to be portable with his or her partner who's moving regularly. So it's powerful to be able to bring work to folks like those, and that's the great work that we at Arise do every single day.
Robert, so directly, indirectly, you said 70,000 people?
70,000 across the U.S. today.
That's incredible. And life around work, right? Hot topic and work-life balance and figuring that out. Get a little bit, we're not here to plug Arise. I want to talk about what I've seen you be a servant leader in for years. And we want to get into that because if you're listening, Robert's been the ideal volunteer leader. He's that guy that every organization, he's like the dream recruit. And I want to know what caught your attention in the places you've served, the places you've given to, the places your family has served in, and just to help the nonprofits, the organizations that are with us. But before we're going to get to that, tell us how life around work. What is it exactly that Arise does that allows for that? And is there a space for nonprofits to learn or to even leverage the service?
Yeah, it's a great question, H. Listen, I think the nonprofit space is one that absolutely could leverage, a group of, users on a platform like Arise. I mean, these are folks that pick the work they do and they pick their schedule, right? So even as you think about nonprofits from a fundraising perspective, there's no doubt that there are key times during the day for that outreach to occur when people are going to be, more readily available to take the call, right? Or to, answer the phone, and making sure you're applying your resources at the time when individuals are most likely going to be available, without question is going to increase your contact rate and allow for you the opportunity to potentially increase your fundraising output. So I think there's always an element when you think about nonprofits and the importance around kind of raising funds and capital to make sure they can do the great work that they've set out to do every single day, to make sure that they're being really tactical about how they're spending their dollars and cents or their volunteer hours, if you will, to make sure they're getting the best bang for either that volunteer's time or the money that they're spending for that particular exercise.
And we'll put some links, but how can the leaders listening find out more? Where can they visit? How can they reach you about Arise?
Yeah, I'm available on LinkedIn. Just check me out, Robert Padron. There's not many of us on there. I'm the guy with the funny hand signals. Or don't hesitate to reach out to ariseworkfromhome.com or arise.com for more info.
Love Absolutely. It. Love it. Love it. Now, Colin, jump in because we've talked about this. I've seen Robert, in action. Actually, he's an artist as well, which is a fun fact. Should we link to some clips, man, to some musical clips of this?
Do it.
Yeah, do it. Oh, it'll go viral, man. That's good.
Go ahead.
But only the funny videos, like me tripping over myself or dropping the mic. Just
blooper
those
reel.
things. Those are fun. That's what people really want to see.
Blooper reel. But I've talked to Colin about this and talking about like, well, who is Robert, right? And I've seen him in action. It does feel like you manage your time well and you manage your priorities well. And obviously you've learned that over the years, but you've been kind of that dream recruit for organizations where you're willing to serve, volunteer, give your time, give of your resources, and specifically financially even. I've seen that. You go above and beyond with your family and include all of them, not just you, and you're not trying to just make a name and get your name out there. You sincerely, so for those listening, what does it take to attract and retain? I'm going to be specific and put you on the spot. And you didn't ask for this. You're not like you're humblepie.com guy here. Like, but
go for it. H.
Yeah. No. So what does it take to attract a guy like you? If I'm trying to recruit you and I see the capacity you have, what's done it in the past in the places you've been a part of? What does it take?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously, first of all, like I, as an individual, have to have a desire, right? To do something, right? So that first of all, you sometimes have to find a way to create desire in someone. But when someone has that desire, I think what's always been important to me as a leader myself is like clarity and purpose. Like specifically, like what is the organization attempting to achieve or to accomplish? Like, do they have a clear mission? Do they have a clear vision? Something that I can get behind and be part of? Or, right, the other element is, is it a potential organization where I can see that there is a gap that my capabilities can fill so that I can feel like I'm actively contributing to the purpose and or mission of that organization. So I think, A, clarity on purpose, and then B, right, as an individual, making sure that I could find a way to fit into solving for a gap that an organization might have that based on my breadth of experience, I feel like I can facilitate on behalf of that organization as a volunteer.
That's good.
Yeah, that's great. You talked about, obviously there's got to be a desire and, you can kind of cross your fingers and hope that you find people that align with that. But you also mentioned creating a desire. Any tips or even examples where you found an org that has done that for you or done that for somebody else? If they want to go about, like, how would I even start to think about what does it look like to create a desire for somebody that aligns with our mission?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it sits untapped within many of the organizations, right? So I think it's really taking stock and inventory of, as an example in the church setting, like who your congregation is, right? Like really understanding the skills and capabilities of the individuals in the congregation, right? More than an individual kind of sitting in a seat every Sunday, right? Like who are these people? What capabilities do they have? Like where might it make sense to plug in? And then you can create really specific campaigns to align individuals' interests with like needs that the organization might have. And I think the same holds true for like more broadly across nonprofits. If you think about nonprofits focused on, let's say, something as, relevant as like the American Heart Association, right? If you can tap into folks who have had experiences with, some form of heart disease or an issue with a family member that they've seen individuals go through, like just tapping into the into the emotions, psyche, right, and capabilities of the individual. I think a lot of times organizations don't do effective job just taking the opportunity that sits in front of them every single weekend, right, or every
Sure.
single time that they choose to give, and just use that separate from like finding new individuals to come in. Obviously, people tend to associate with people like themselves. I'm not like that. I like to be with people who aren't exactly like me, because I think you grow from that. That's where you grow. But a lot of people hang out with folks that are like them, right? So if you're tapping into someone in the organization that maybe isn't utilized, all their giftings aren't utilized, then they may bring in other people that are like them who can continue to build in this area of strength that you're looking to kind of help solve for. That might be a gap in the firm today.
I like that.
Great.
Robert, tell me about getting really specific and drill down.
Yeah.
The actual
Yeah.
big ask. Make sure you guys pronounce that correctly.
Yeah. It's important.
Some leaders forget. They may even inspire, and they get to a place where now you have some purpose or clarity, but they don't ask or they don't go. What have you seen in that realm? What has worked? What hasn't? What's your expectation? What triggers you? What motivates you? What is there like a cringe? Talk to me.
Yeah. I think the cringe for me is always, I'll start there and maybe work my way backwards. The cringe for me always is like you have someone sitting in front of you that can do these three things that your organization needs. And you yourself, like as let's say the leader in that circumstance, like just continue to try and do it yourself. When you've got someone in the corner that's like, "Hey, put me in, coach. Like I got this for you." But so many times I find leaders are uncomfortable deferring responsibility or deferring accountability because there's this power desire that many leaders have when they get to a level of leadership. And that kind of deferral of accountability or responsibility then is like, oh, am I less powerful now? When the reality of the situation is if you let the player in the game, you yourself as a leader are way more capable and way more equipped because you have just a much wider net and more diverse net of capability that you're putting in the game to win the game. And I think that's critical. You should find people as a leader who have strengths that you don't, and surround yourself with them, because that's going to help you be stronger. That's going to help the team be stronger. So it's cringy for me when people don't recognize how simple it is to do that, and honestly, how it makes your job as a leader even easier when you're surrounded by expertise. I think the simplest thing for leaders to do is like just make the ask, right?
Yeah.
Just ask the person, hey, it looks like you have amazing capabilities in the following area. Like, I'd love for you to jump in and do Y for us at the organization. And just making that simple ask. So many times we're afraid to ask the question because we fear the no. But so many times, if you really understand the person, you've gotten the opportunity to know them, their answer is going to be yes. Because people just want to be, people in general want to feel wanted, needed, part of something. So just make the ask. You'll be surprised how many times you'll get a yes.
Yeah. And so let's even go to the other side of that. And maybe you've seen this, maybe you've been a part of it, but how would you, what would you say to an org who wants to do that, but doesn't maybe want to overstep or doesn't want to go too far, because you've got someone who's so willing, and a lot of times it's a volunteer capacity. So how do they navigate giving that opportunity, but not taking advantage, not doing too much?
Yeah, I think that's why it's important to, I always say the first thing a leader should do is get to know someone. And I think in the context of working with volunteers, you really have to know, inclusive of how much time do you have in a week? You know what I mean? For you to live out your purpose every single week, get your full-time job done, actively spend time with your family, how much time are you willing to invest in this volunteer activity every single week? And I think, if they say, hey, I've got 4 hours a week, right? Start them at 2. Start them in 2 just so they can figure out how that works within the context of their life. Because I think sometimes what, organizations that are really dependent upon volunteers do is they'll take all the 4 hours in the beginning. And then the person gets burned out because they aspirationally want to say they can do more than they can actually do. But then they start serving 4 hours a week. And then, hey, there's potentially problems at home because they're not spending enough time with the kids, or they're not spending as much time as work if they need to because they want to give that 4 hours. And then over time, they end up giving nothing. When if you just start them maybe at 50% of what they say they're available to do, and then work them up from there, then they've got the confidence that they can actually give this time and do so successfully with all the priorities they have in their life.
That's great.
Robert, what has made you drop it? Just run away.
Just run away.
Run away. And you were committed, you were in, but it just, and again, this is just for, we're helping organizations that may be doing this and not even knowing they're doing anything. What stands out? Give me some tips.
I think two things. And then maybe they're tied to the first thing, like crappy leadership, just like crappy leadership. Right. And leadership that then kind of overutilizes volunteers. Like, so it's kind of like, hey, we've got this group of volunteers. Like, I know I can depend on them all the time. So like, I don't have to worry so much about continuing to build the team. I'm just going to lean on this team really, really, really hard to the point that they get, overutilized. I find, and I think it's actually one of the interesting things about, at least in my experience now, about nonprofits is you join or you get into that field because you're passionate about what that nonprofit's about, right? So in the church saying like, I'm passionate like about Jesus. So like, I'm going to be a pastor, or like, I'm going to work at a church. Like that's the passion, right? But what I have found many times is many of those folks are great advocates for the word, but ill-equipped as leaders. And what I mean by
that'll preach.
Yeah.
Say that again. Say that again. Say that again.
They're powerful advocates for the word, but ill-equipped as leaders, right? So I think what that then happens is you then try to drive the organization as an advocate for the word. And the word has many lessons about leadership, right? Like I'm a fan of Maxwell's like 21 laws of leadership. And like, that's the Bible that I use, you know what I mean? Just because there's good leadership context. So there's a lot in there, but there many times aren't real lessons or practical lessons around like, how do you lead this like as an organization? How do you grow people? How do you develop people? How do you build culture? How do you define mission, vision, purpose, goals, right? How do you get people around that? And I think that a lot of times organizations might say, oh, like practically, like I'm smart enough to recognize like I need vision, mission, and goals, but I'm not equipped to then translate that mission, vision, and goals into like practical application with the team. So then what happens is you end up getting this mismatch of like, my mission statement is the following, but I don't see that acted out in real life anywhere throughout the organization. And that's just, I think, a real challenge from what I've seen in many organizations that really are differentiated in ability to grow versus ability to get to a certain point and plateau.
That's good. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. It sounds like you're talking about the difference of, having a mission statement, having a vision, but then being able to actually build a culture around that reflects it and that represents it. Talk good and bad. What are some scenarios? What are some examples of when you've seen really bad culture, but then you've seen really good culture? What do each of those look like?
And name all the names, please.
Yeah, exactly.
All the names.
Yeah. We'll give links.
We'll censor. We'll bleep it out. We got a button here.
Name all the names. Well, first of all, I'll start with
Here it is.
Acme Widgets.
Oh, okay. Acme Widgets.
It's always a great company to use in context. There may be a firm called Acme Widgets, and I'm always trashing them. I don't know.
Is that from Tiny Toons?
I have no idea where it's from.
I remember watching cartoons.
Acme.
Yeah.
The it may very well be.
Yeah, they do big hammers.
If you're listening to this and you have an organization named Acme, I'm sorry.
Sponsored by, that's our sponsor, bro. We just lost our sponsor.
Yeah. Rename your company. It's too basic. It's time for rebranding.
There you go.
But I think practically, just a couple things as I think about like good culture versus bad culture. I think good culture is one where everyone in the organization actively participates. Bad culture is one in which the leadership believes they define the culture and everyone else has to follow it, right?
Woo.
Typically there are more workers if you will, or volunteers than leaders in an organization. So to think for a minute that they're not part of developing the culture of the nonprofit or the firm, frankly, is just it's inaccurate, right? So you obviously need to have like, in a good culture, you're going to have champions for culture, right? You may even have someone that's like the chief culture person. You know what I mean? Like their job is to make sure it's sustained in every facet of the organization, that we talk about it, right? That we measure it, that we ask people, whether or not, they would rate the culture as positive or negative. Like you can even use a point scale for that, right? So, but to think that the entire universe of people volunteering and or employed in a nonprofit aren't part of the culture is just ignorant. So I think the ability to make sure that you're rooting out individuals who aren't aligned with what the culture of the organization is, or should be, rooting those individuals out quickly is really critical, because a single individual can have an immediate impact or detrimental impact on culture of a firm. So figuring out those I would describe as like bad hires, or maybe people who aren't ready to actually really serve in a volunteer capacity, is really important.
All right, so Robert, you hit on something here that's very relevant, currently everywhere. Let's assume Colin over here is a volunteer, signed up, did a good job for a month or two.
Yeah.
It's just
Usually
not
how it goes.
Yeah, usually how it goes.
I'm all in.
Not responding. Can you fire a volunteer? You're not paying them. They agreed to something. Let's do a case study. Let them go right now. Fire Colin right now, Robert. How would you do that?
Yeah. I think it's a great, like, here's how I play it out. Like, I think first of all is, I'd attempt to do some outreach to Colin, right? Like just get a sense of like what's going on in his life, right? Like volunteers, like their version of money, like receipt from an organization, right? It's clearly not money, right? It's the value of the time that they're putting into the organization. Like what am I extracting out of it, right? So there could be other things pulling on Colin's time. So like, I'd want to understand like, hey, Colin, like, oh my goodness, like you are always signing up, at least twice a week to do the following job. Looks like it's been tough for you to kind of continue that commitment. Like, what's going on in life, man? Like anything we can help with, anything I can talk to you about, like, are there other ways we can get you plugged in, right? So giving him an opportunity to kind of talk about like what's preventing it, and or giving him an outlet to potentially do something different, right? Where he may be like, well, this is the only thing they're going to ask me to do here. Well, maybe that's the only thing he wants to do. So let's find out why he's not doing it. Or conversely, maybe there's something else that he wants to do, right? And we just need to create that opportunity for him, number one, right? But if Colin continues to commit, right, like, and let's say accepts the planning center request every single weekend, right, and just
people do that. They click yes.
People do that. People do that.
Every now and again.
People also click yes, right? And my favorites are the one that never click anything. Like just tell me one way or the other.
Exactly. Just text me. Just text me.
A no is always better. Always better than a no.
No, it's always better. But I think in the context of like the yes and not showing up, then I think it's okay to have like what I would consider to be like the accountability conversation with the individual, right? And say, hey, Colin, like I see you accept every single week, but like I don't see you then show up, right? Or put in the work, right? And so there may be things going on that I'm here for you, man. Like I'm ready to talk to you about those things. But my take is that there are things going on in your life that are preventing you from doing that. And maybe this is a season in your life where you just need to sit and take in. Like maybe that's the message you're sending me, is like you just want to sit in that chair and take in. And I want you to know that that's okay, right? When you're ready to come back, like you let us know, like you let me know, and we'll plug you right back in. But my sense, unless you tell me different, is now's the time that you can't plug in. And that's okay, but still take in. You may not be able to plug in, but still take in.
That's great. That's great. And I'm going to say it right now, that's a clip right there. Because what I love is that, like you can fire them, but still have their, like, that's just great leadership. You can still have their best interest in mind. You can still have an understanding of this is where you're at, or this is, because you're still worried about, okay, I'm not just trying to get rid of you. I'm trying to say, what is the most helpful thing for you right now to
Yeah.
get you to a place where you're growing, and that's
Yeah.
just going to help everything else grow. That's such a great
I
thing.
think the key, Colin, right, is like I always say, like this leadership's about like winning hearts and minds. I think that's the same, in whether or not it's like for-profit business or nonprofit business, right? And you're talking about people, like people. I genuinely believe people want to do a good job in whatever capacity it is, right?
Right.
Their employment, their volunteerhood. If not, they wouldn't have like said, "Hey, put me in," right? But if you're investing enough in individuals, like especially volunteers, if you're actively engaged in knowing who they are, you're actively invested in them, right? And you're filling their emotional piggy bank, as I like to describe it, with like, just really positive stuff. When it's time to have that conversation, or let's say the difficult conversation where you're making a withdrawal versus a deposit, you're not leaving them emotionally bankrupt because you've invested so much in them. They can handle that difficult conversation because they're still 90% full in their bank account.
That's great.
Robert, so you talk about winning minds and hearts. Love that. We are obviously creative agency, marketing agency that serves nonprofits, churches. Speak to that. What has done it for you? What are some tools? What are some techniques? What are some things that are well done or neglected in doing that job? Because I think that the job of creativity is solution to solve a problem, to tell a story, etc. But what comes to your mind when you look at winning minds and hearts and how creativity or an agency or a team in-house outsourced can help do exactly that?
Listen, I think in nonprofit, like more than for profit, even though I say in for profit, like if you can find a way to connect hearts and minds, maybe a little more difficult, right? But in nonprofit, like it's more than anything about building the connection that's going to last with that individual, right, who's getting some form of service from your nonprofit, right? Like, so it's all about winning hearts and minds. So I think creatively, like, visually, like, H, you've done great work over the years from my perspective around like really connecting the feeling that a person is having to like a visual representation of what that like internal feeling might look like, through whether or not it's kind of video or the way that you might set up a worship set or like whatever it might be. So I think the more that you can creatively utilize that to elicit an emotion from an individual, that then helps them get connected to what it is that your nonprofit's attempting to accomplish. And more so, it even validates for you that your nonprofit's actually making that connection because you can physically see someone potentially having an emotion, whether or not it's like a tear or anger in certain scenarios, right? From some people, and just something's going on emotionally for them. So I think that's super critical at the end of the day to just to make sure like all of that creativity is centered around like, how do I elicit a response? How do I elicit emotion? Like, how do I create a feeling that causes that individual to be like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I need to hear today. Or, oh my goodness, that's the exact point which causes me to be connected.
Yeah, and it's the old saying, right? That people may not or won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Yeah,
totally.
And Robert, we were talking about not too long ago. I remember us talking, kind of discussing the Florida Publix or the Publix commercials and how for profit, obviously, but how they do such a great job in making grocery shopping, buying your milk, but how they elicit an emotion that you're like, dude, it is a stinking pleasure. You're making this a pleasure, right?
Totally. I'm waiting for the Thanksgiving commercials they're going to bring out because I'm just like, that's it. I'm going to cry. Like, I'm just going to cry.
Get the box of tissues ready.
That's it. That's it. And Robert, thanks for making the time, man. I've seen your schedule. I've seen how you're flying, you're traveling, you're you're a trusted voice on LinkedIn, on social. You're serving around the clock. I see it through the organizations you serve and give to. How do you do it from a leadership perspective? Give me some life hacks. Give me some things. Is it fake it till you make it, or is there some practical things here? Right? Give the leader some tips.
I think there are some days where it's fake it till you make it, like because life happens, right? But I do believe that you fundamentally can make time for whatever's important to you, right? So I'm at the point in my life, and I think I'm always like, man, I should have got there sooner. But I'm at the point in my life now where it's really clear to me like what is important. So then I schedule accordingly, right? And I think when I say schedule accordingly, I mean like be practical about that. Like, my entire, for me, what helps me be efficient from a time management perspective is like everything that I'm going to spend time on, I have scheduled. right? So even little things like during the day, like you can work a full day, and like the way schedules and people throw stuff on your calendar today, you could work through lunch. Like you could physically not take lunch, right?
Yeah.
But even practical things about like, no, like I've got lunch scheduled. Even if it's like 30 or 15 minutes, like that's my time. I'm going to take it. And I think the same thing holds true for everyone. I mean, crap, I have like on my crap. Well, that's an interesting use of word, but I think I said crappy earlier too. It's the word of the day.
We'll bleep it.
So I think I think the key thing is like even simple things like I use like my calendar even to remind myself to make sure like I send a text to my kids every day saying like, hey, how much I love them. That I remind myself like, hey, it's time for my 15 minutes with God, right? Or hey, remind yourself to tell your wife you love her, because the day will move so quickly. So for me, I just need that like single repository of like, do this, Padron, right? So I think you'll make time for what's important to you and how you schedule that. Listen, like I use my calendar, right? Other people might use a notebook, right? Other people might create a to-do list, but just find some practical way to make sure that you can fit those things into, this thing we call life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think a lot of times in this talk of like, how do I be more productive? We talk a lot about like, well, do this, do this, do this. I imagine a lot of that though is the things that you say no to, or like you said, the time that you set aside to be able to recharge. Just for fun, Robert, what are some of those things for you? What helps you be able to step out of that a little bit, recharge?
Yeah. I'll tell you, like, interestingly enough, like I do get like my volunteer work, no doubt, like is a recharge for me. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like one of the reasons I'm passionate about like even serving like in worship is because like that's a recharge for me. It like connects my creativity to things that I'm joyful about, both like, from a musician perspective, but also like just like, the ability to kind of lead people in a different capacity than I do every single day. So that's absolutely a recharge for me, like, or get recharged by exercise. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
those, like whatever it is, just find your thing and just make sure you have at least time for that every single week. But I love your point, Colin, around no. Like we talk a lot in my organization about like in order to say yes to things that we should be doing, we have to say no to things
Hmm.
that might be nice to do or fun to do, but
Right.
don't directly correlate to like the mission and the journey that we're on. There's a great methodology by Harvard professor. It's like in the Harvard Business Review, and it talks about like playing to win. It's a really specific way to build strategy that enables you and equips your firm to kind of say like, so because this is so clear, this particular activity doesn't fit into anything related to our strategy, so we shouldn't be spending any time on it, right?
Hmm.
And I think nonprofits can benefit from that as well. Like specifically, what are we not going to do? I say no to a lot, and that's okay, right? Or I reallocate time to do something at a later date. But I do that because I'm really clear on like where I should be spending my time versus where I shouldn't be. So it's a great call out, Colin. You got to be able to
Love
say
it.
no to things.
Any tech tools, any innovation, any AI you've been using lately that you would suggest to leaders listening?
Listen, people need to get around ChatGPT, right?
Agreed.
And generative
100%.
AI. Like, there's no doubt, especially in the I would say in the sales and marketing function, it's definitely changing the way that organizations are um, are working. I think the speed with which you can create content
Hmm.
is much different than it ever was before. I always say then you're going to have a good copywriter because ChatGPT clearly claims that what I tell you may be awfully inaccurate, right? So you've got to have some copywriters to validate it.
Yes.
But it definitely reduces the time frame to build content that then ties to a blog or ties to a potential topic on a podcast or I even asked ChatGPT to write like a 15-minute speech for me the other day, and I was like, wow, that's actually not
Yeah.
that bad.
Yeah.
Just use that. So I think it's a balance that you're going to have to do, but I think there's no doubt like ChatGPT, everyone's talking about it. I think it's overplayed right now, and there's specific use cases where it will be impactful. But what I heard an analyst say one day is that the reason things like ChatGPT and generative AI will actually have a profound impact versus things like RPA, robotics process automation, and other things where they didn't is because consumers are using ChatGPT today. Like students are going in and saying, well, maybe they shouldn't, but students are going in and saying like, hey, write this paper for me. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that's happening. It's just easy to use. So as a byproduct, nonprofits and for-profits, right, are going to have consumers that are used to engaging with that type of technology. So as a byproduct, like there'll be much greater adoption than there has been in maybe other areas in the past.
Absolutely. It's like my kids growing up. If it's not a touch screen, it's old, right? And they grow
Yeah,
up with an iPhone, so it's native. So, next gen is growing up with AI as native to their language, to their style.
totally.
So it's impossible to ignore, and the acceleration is scary. But I think we need to be brave and bold and learn
Yeah.
and fight the learning curve and go for it. But I love that. Real quick, on the same topic, and then we're going to wrap up here. Rob, gamification and technology. You're wearing the Arise Gaming T-shirt, so not a plug,
Oh,
not
wow.
sponsored.
Yeah.
Unless there's an interest, we can talk. But tell me about Arise Gaming. What's the exploration and the lane there?
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt that like the online gaming space continues to be a growing, multi-billion-dollar global enterprise, right? I think there are many studies about like the actual increase in individuals' aptitude from an early age from gaming. Now, type of game is always important, right? So I
Yeah.
totally go by the rating systems there. But to your earlier point, like you can use technology for good, right? And with the advent of things like coding schools for young children, like there's no doubt that this gaming community will continue to grow and increase. So for us at Arise, people are passionate about gaming. Like they're gamers. Like they spend a lot of time gaming. That's how they recharge after a busy day. So what that means is, you could have a gamer, talking or engaging with a gamer
It's
of that
community,
exact
yeah.
same game, right? So you're just building community, trust and safety, all that fun stuff. So, that's a place for us. But, I think it's also a place where as you think about gamification, right? Like, people also love winning. Like there's practical examples of like, using men as an example, like we're naturally competitive. Like we naturally want to win. Like we're bred in that particular way. So even finding ways to kind of gamifying, what your outreach is, can become really important for profit. There's a number of ways that you can facilitate that.
I love that. So we're going to end with the game. We're going to play
No
Mortal
fun.
Kombat.
Mortal Kombat.
Nah, I don't. What was your game? I'm not a gamer. I have gamed in my life. Oh, rock paper scissors. What do you have a game that if you gamed? If you
Man,
were
listen, I'm not a gamer. I attempt to play Super Mario Brothers with my kid, but because I'm competitive, I don't. Because I always lose. He's got way more expertise than me in that case.
it's
So
unfair.
like, I just don't game. Maybe Candyland.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And was it?
Yeah, you
Animal
don't want
Crossing?
your kid growing up being like, yeah, I used to get spanked. Not because I was in trouble, just because I kept beating my dad at video games. And-
Mario
Yeah,
Kart,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
More-
totally.
Same. We do more. Robert, thank you so much. And I look at your office. You have hustle. You've got grind. You've got all the and I see that. But I also love that I see good vibes only. Right.
Yeah.
And I think there's you definitely, manifest, express, live that out. And I appreciate the vibes you put online, in person to your team. Keep it up, man. Keep going and reach out. If you guys want to if you need to bring Robert to your organization and or partner with his company and what he's doing, I highly recommend it. We'll put all the links so you can stay in touch. Any final thoughts, Mr. Padron, before we wrap up today?
Thanks, H. Tremendous amount of respect for you, Colin. Good to meet you. Great conversation. Keep doing what you guys do every single day. Would love to see nonprofits find incremental ways to take lessons from for-profit organizations, insert them into nonprofit organizations, and just allow those types of organizations to see exponential growth.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, helping people grow further, grow faster. So, hey, if you're listening, if you liked what you hear, go ahead, like, subscribe, share it with somebody else. We are so grateful to have you here. And again, Robert, we're grateful to have you with us today. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time on a Nonprofit Renaissance.
Thanks again for listening to the Nonprofit Renaissance. We hope it ignites a renaissance in you and helps you go further and grow faster. Be sure to share, rate, and subscribe. And if you'd like to recommend or be a guest on our show, send us an email at podcast@verstcreative.com.